I should mention, just to echo what Justin said about the Iowa group, that everybody who's been involved in this conference, including all of the ASL interpreters, are here as volunteers. This is all a volunteer event. So we've got an excellent lineup of speakers for the day. But, kicking it off is internet sensation Karen Straughan, all the way from Calgary. Karen is an advocate for the equal treatment of men in a culture that erroneously believes they are privileged. She's devoted the last 6 years to developing an understanding of the social, cultural, psychological, and biological dynamics behind gender role enforcement and sexual politics. Her YouTube channel, GirlWritesWhat, has over 130,000 subscribers and more than 12 million video views. So we'll add a few to that today, I think. And her work has been presented in high school and university classrooms in the USA, in Canada, and in Ireland. Please welcome Karen Straughan.
Okay, first off, I gotta ask, does it work?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to scroll for you manually, but it should work.
Okay. Alright, excellent. Because this is my first time ever using visual aids, ever using slides, and it had to be a disaster. They were downloading an emergency Adobe Reader at the last minute, so, or a PDF reader. So, anyhow, thank you everybody for coming out. Thanks, Cafe. It's an honor to actually be a keynote. It's a first for me. I also wanted to apologize in advance for inevitably bumming you out with my talk. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows how sticky and stubborn and difficult the problem is in terms of even bringing up a conversation about men's issues, how it rubs people so much the wrong way. And so that is what this talk is going to be about. It's going to be about looking at some of the stickier problems and the more intractable ones. And I will leave the less sticky problems for others to deal with later in the day. Justin, Trottier, the organizational, logistical problems of setting up a center, of setting up an organization, they're difficult and they're not easy, but you can do them. And one of the things that I think might bum everybody out is asking the question as to whether we can really do anything about some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. So, on we go. Slide 1. Okay, so most of us are familiar with the phrase "down the rabbit hole," and that it's from Alice in Wonderland. And it represents the exploration of ideas or phenomena that, to any rational observer, are nonsensical or insane. And this is one of the most common analogies used by people when they become aware of men's issues and they try to do something about them. And a lot of those people were not like Alice. They didn't just stumble across a rabbit in a waistcoat and follow it out of curiosity. A lot of people who deal with these issues were forcibly shoved down the rabbit hole against their will. So, yeah. Next slide. Another popular analogy in the men's movement originates from the movie The Matrix. When one takes the red pill, one is awakened to the true, terrible nature of reality that has been concealed by a facade of normalcy. The life you believed you were living is merely an illusion imposed on you by powerful external forces, and the reality is something entirely different. And both of these analogies, in my opinion, are off the mark. They don't work. Life down the rabbit hole is nonsensical, random, and arbitrary. Next slide. And none of the suffering of men in society or in the past, none of the barriers faced by men's issues advocates, none of those can be described as nonsensical, random, or arbitrary. They exist for a reason. Next one. Life in the Matrix is portrayed as an illusion where powerful external forces have utterly concealed the true nature of reality from those existing within it. But the nature of our reality in terms of gender lies right in plain view. It's not hidden from us. It has never been hidden from us. Our reality is ubiquitous and obvious. And more importantly, it has not been imposed on us by our alien overlords. It's ultimately a monster of our own invention. So I would like to use a different analogy. Ogres are like onions. And yeah, I get my best material from children's stories. Next slide. Patriarchy everywhere. So according to our buddy Shrek, ogres are like onions not because they stink or because they make you cry, but because they have layers. So what's an ogre? It's a fictional beast of human invention, powerful, dangerous, and difficult to get along with. And without us, ogres cannot exist. They are in our brains. That's where they live. And what's an onion? It is a thing of nature. It is organic, it has many layers, it's delicious to many, many people, and it makes you cry. For example, Gordon Smith, a man from Delaware who I have had the pleasure of meeting in person, he was caught up in a series of false allegations made by his wife during a divorce and custody battle several years ago. He was arrested 8 times relating to 13 different provably false allegations, and only saw an end to his ordeal when the ankle bracelet he'd been ordered to wear, despite never having been so much as charged, let alone convicted with any crime, placed him miles and miles away from his wife when she claimed to police that, in a hospital ER, that he'd just beaten her up in an alley a few minutes before. An allegation that I guess was fresh enough that she couldn't explain away her lie by saying she'd misremembered the time and the date. He described the experience of her abusive process as going to bed one night in America and waking up the next morning in Pyongyang, stripped of what he had always believed were his constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedoms. But Gordon didn't wake up in Pyongyang. He woke up in America, and it was the exact same America he'd gone to bed in the night before. That he had never realized how America would one day persecute him does not mean the US was some kind of giant Potemkin village, nor that the laws and policies that nearly destroyed him were constructed without his awareness, perhaps not even without his consent. I would be willing to bet that, like many men before that axe hit him, he supported the Violence Against Women Act, which happened to be the primary instrument of his own undoing. He, like everyone else, heard that this act would protect women from physically abusive men and sexually abusive men, and who wouldn't want that? And you know, if there were due process protections that were just in the way of those, of helping those women, we're willing to let them go. Even if he'd thought to ask about those protections, I would hazard to guess that he'd have thought them a small price to pay if it meant women would be protected from abusive and violent men. The ogre didn't sneak up on him, or on any of us. We just didn't realize it was an ogre until it was way too late. Next slide. So we've got a list of structural challenges here, and I'm not going to talk a lot about those because these are the challenges faced by organizations like CAFE, and these are the kinds of things that I'm really not very good at. I couldn't organize a trip to the toilet if there were more than one person involved. So, but I will give you a sense, that these institutions, these systems, they didn't construct themselves. They weren't imposed on us by reptilians in orbit over planet Earth. Humans made them, and however difficult it might be now to deal with or dismantle them, others here will, I'm sure, be in a better position to try and figure out how to do that. I'll give you an example of how a well-intentioned legal construct can become a brick wall for advocates fighting for men. And I'm using the example of Earl Silverman here, going by my memory of some of our longer conversations, about his second attempt at a hearing before the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And his first attempt at a hearing had been denied on multiple grounds. The Commission felt Earl had not made a valid case that the government's discrimination against men put men at any kind of disadvantage. The existence of a significant population of male victims of domestic violence doesn't necessarily demonstrate that there's a need for shelters for men. Therefore, lack of shelters and services does not necessarily represent a meaningful harm or substantive discrimination. More than this, men are, in the view of the law and the government, structurally advantaged. And because of this, it is perfectly within the bounds of the law to discriminate against them in favor of women. One cannot reasonably sue an institution for being in violation of the Charter rights when it is acting well within the bounds of the Charter. So let's look at this. This is what we're talking about. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Now that's just excellent. And then in the very next paragraph, they fuck it all up. Subsection 1 does not preclude, next slide, does not preclude any law, program, or activity that has as its object the amelioration of conditions of disadvantaged individuals or groups, including those that are disadvantaged because of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental and physical disability. Okay, well that's gender neutral too, right? Isn't it? But you know what gets in the way? You know what isn't gender neutral? Decades of case law. Decades of case law. Every judicial decision that included a finding that women are structurally disadvantaged made it easier to demonstrate disadvantage the next time. This is all saying the same thing. Women are disadvantaged. And ironically, the more these cases of discrimination are ameliorated, with every single legal victory feminist groups achieve, the easier it is to demonstrate in a court that they're structurally disadvantaged. I mean, look at all that case law that says so. So the very system designed to help make women equal cannot even countenance the idea that women are equal, or perhaps even more equal than others. How can they be when there's all this case law saying the opposite? And as long as feminist legal foundations and advocacy groups are bringing cases and winning them and adding to that body of case law, it's really easy to squeeze out a man like Earl Silverman. There's no case law saying men are disadvantaged. None. It all says the opposite. So Earl took a different tack the second time. He opened a shelter so that the next time he went before the commission he could demonstrate a need that was not being fulfilled through government services. He continued to wrestle with the Provincial Department of Health and Human Services and the federal minister responsible for the status of women, and continued to be given the runaround, just like before, and he also constructed an argument to use on his next run at the HRC. Society is not static, it's organic. It grows and it changes, and the law needs to reflect that growth and change. Efforts to ameliorate women's disadvantage have been so successful that it is now men who are sometimes at a disadvantage in some areas of life. HRC acknowledged the validity of that argument, and then they denied him a hearing. The argument was valid, but you know, HRC just wasn't convinced it was applicable in this particular case. I mean, just look at all the case law regarding women and domestic violence. So what's really going on here? This is where we come to the really sticky problems. And the really, really, really sticky problem is us. It's us. So next slide. Oh yeah, sorry, I missed the slide. This, wait, down. Down, no, other way, other way, yeah. Okay, this is what a friend of mine dubbed this case law thing, the feminist self-licking ice cream cone. Otherwise known as the more equal you are, the more disadvantaged you look like. With every amelioration, the wealth of evidence of oppression gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. And the next one, human challenges. So we've got sexual dimorphism, gynocentrism, the women are wonderful effect, those are all related. We have tribalism, sacred objects, and ultrasociality. sunken costs and belief perseverance, and men themselves. And these are all I'm going to take an evolutionary psychology approach to all of these because these are the stickiest problems. When the problem is in here and in every one of us, that's what we're going to actually have to be able to overcome. So, sexual dimorphism is much more than a function of relative size of men and women. It affects our behaviors, our attitudes, our approaches to the opposite sex, and our personalities. And it's also reflected in our physical appearance in terms of something called neoteny, which is the retention of juvenile or infantile characteristics of an ancestor species into adulthood in the descendant species. So in other words, if you compare early hominid skulls to ours, our skulls in adulthood look much more like the skulls of the infant or juvenile early hominids. So we retain a lot of things into adulthood that other animals don't tend to retain. Curiosity, the desire to have fun. Other animals don't tend to party a lot. They don't go on vacations. They just get down with the work of living and mostly lie around and stuff. The playful animals like dogs and cats, house cats and otters, and those kinds of animals all have highly neotenized phenotypes. So let's go to the next slide and we'll look at someone who's low in neoteny. They're very low in neoteny. Okay, and individuals who are low in neoteny are perceived as intimidating. Okay, now the next one. See? There you go. Scary guy. Okay. Now let's look at the next one. Individuals who are high in neoteny are perceived as more sociable. In other words, they're perceived as friendly, affiliative, and, well, nice. More than this, our sympathies are triggered by neoteny, the cuteness of babies, for instance. So let's have a look at this next. Yeah. Okay, neoteny code red. You really want to be nice to that puppy, don't you? Because he's just so nice right up until he bites your fingers off. Okay, and babies, they make you kind of want to be nice to them, or at least not be mean to them. This is how babies survive when they're such a pain in the ass. It's their superpower, next one. Okay, there we go. It's one of the most important psychological mechanisms that we humans have in order to help the next generation make it to adulthood, especially during the most vulnerable phases of their lives, is that they're just so darn cute. Now, both men and women, oh wait, and here's another one. Neoteny really is good for raising money. Here we go, there we go. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Just, I want to get out my wallet right now. So, both men and women are extremely neotenous compared to, say, chimpanzees or gorillas, both in terms of physical neoteny and psychological neoteny. But women have men beat physically, hands down. They do. They're just cuter, they seem nicer, just to look at. Just to look at. Women's higher average neoteny is not the only cause of unequal treatment, though, and it's not just a cause of unequal treatment. It's also a symptom of unequal treatment. It's a byproduct of it. If women evolve to be cuter than men, in order to be perceived as nicer and friendlier and more affiliative and less threatening, well, it's because being cute presents a significant benefit in terms of evolutionary pressures. And a trait has to do one simple thing. It has to, in order to become adaptive, help you and or your descendants reproduce. And it can do this by making you more sexually attractive to others or by helping you survive long enough to pass on your genes. Now, obviously, if men did not evolve the same degree of neoteny as women, it's because it's just not as good a strategy. If it helps you survive, it doesn't help you get laid. If it helps you get laid, it doesn't help you survive. One or the other, right? It's just not as effective for them. Now, the reason for this is because of gynocentrism. Let's go to the, oh wait, look at that. See, which of these women is gonna go to prison for committing a crime? Just ignoring the fact that Sandra Bernhardt is a celebrity, okay? If she was just some woman, who's the jury gonna convict, her or this woman? That's Gordon Smith's ex. And she finally got arrested. I don't think anything came of it. She never went to trial, so, but she's just so darn cute. Gynocentrism is exactly what it sounds like. Women, no, wait. Gynocentrism means that women form the center of societies, and this is not just true of human societies. And it is because of their role in reproduction, right? Human societies have always altered this at their peril. So it is a highly adaptive way of doing things. And this is one of the reasons why it's such an entrenched problem in us. The society that treated female life as inherently expendable simply did not survive as well as the ones that treated female life as precious. And I'm sure nobody needs me to really explain why that is. Every uterus counts, sperm are cheap and plentiful. In terms of group success, that's fundamental calculation. But in terms of sex differences in reproductive strategies, it also plays a role. In a tournament mating system where we came from, the system used by other great apes, all the females have access to sex and reproductive opportunities, every single one of them. So the difference between a successful female and one that is less successful is the difference between having 4 kids and having 6, right? That's not a big difference. For males, it looks more like this. So, both males and females of all social species compete with their same-sex peers for social dominance. In mammals, male intersexual competition is a competition for mating opportunities. Female intrasexual competition is mostly a competition for resources. These competitions result in intrasexual male or female dominance hierarchies. But we humans are unique among primate species. Unlike, say, with chimpanzees, our male dominance hierarchies aren't just about who's biggest, who's toughest, who's the most willing to throw down when challenged. They're also about the acquisition of resources and the transfer of those resources to women. They're also about leadership rather than merely being a thug. The realities of getting food in the nutrient-poor environment, the savanna, where we found ourselves before we became bipedal. It was a place where most of the food walked on legs, and a lot of it was capable of killing you. And that required males to actually cooperate with each other in terms of hunting if anybody was going to get to eat. And when you have to work together, when you're a dominant male and you need the cooperation of these subordinates, well, you have to reward them. You have to give them a fair shake. And so you don't get to hog all the meat for yourself, and in an environment where the women cannot fend for themselves, they cannot be single mothers like they would be in the trees, like chimpanzee mothers and bonobo mothers, because food is abundant and easy to come by. Right? They can't do that in a grassland, not with babies to take care of. They needed to be provisioned, and the dominant male needed to share the take with the subordinates, with his cooperative group. So what you saw was a situation that we see sometimes in chimpanzees and macaques and baboons, where a male will do something, a subordinate male will do something. He will choose a female, he will favor a particular female, and he will give her social grooming, and he'll be extra nice to her, and he'll play with her kids, and he'll help her with it, and he'll share his food with her, and to keep him coming back, she gives him sex. And almost always non-reproductive sex when she's not in estrus. But we started to have to do things differently. And when the dominant male cannot hog the entire gazelle, right, all of a sudden, all of these other males, he doesn't have the food to maintain a harem of 5 or 6 females. right? And all of these other males got a chance, right? And all of that sort of cascaded into a more and more and more cooperative way of doing things, and a way of males being able to get to the point where human males are the most cooperative of any mammal species with each other. In fact, most mammal species that have any sexual dimorphism whatsoever won't even tolerate another male in the group unless he's genetically related. So you guys are special. Like, this is unique. This is a unique thing, this part of our human experiment. The environment also selected for intelligence because it had to select for cooperation. It takes a lot more brain to stalk a gazelle than to stalk a mango. It takes a lot more brain to coordinate the efforts of several individuals at, of all relatively small stature, because we weren't big. We were only about this big back then when we started on this path. In bringing down a large animal with no claws, no fangs, no built-in weaponry, right? And somehow these guys managed to do it. So we human women, when we compete with each other for men, for sexual, compete on our dominance hierarchy, which is often essentially centered around being young and beautiful and curvy and the whole bit, right? We're actually competing for resources. That is the motivation behind that, because men are the path to resources for us and have been for maybe 2, 3, maybe even 6 million years. This way of doing things, men acquiring resources and sharing them with women, and men sharing sexual opportunities with other men, this is one of the primary reasons we've been so successful. It's also one of the reasons we have these big brains of ours, and it's one of the big reasons that we can actually do things like build civilizations. We are the only species of primate who couple monogamously but don't have any hard and fast rules as to who gets to mate. Other monogamous primates, you get one dominant pair, they aggressively police the others. They do nothing but slut shame all day to keep the others from having sex. And for men, one way to attract a partner has always been to show her that he can help provide food for her and any children that they have. This is at least the framework of my hypothesis, the sort of quick and dirty description of how I think all of these things happened, right? How our socio-sexual organization changed and why. And the way we organize our societies led to another big thing, okay? You see those are bees, right? And they live in huge, huge colonies. But they're really, really special. They're called eusocial animals. We are ultra-social animals. We are not eusocial at all. Other animals, group cooperation is limited by kinship. So let's consider our chimpanzee cousins. They live in multi-male, multi-female groups of up to 120 individuals, which is not enough to build a civilization or a freeway. The males tolerate each other because they're all genetically related. It is the females, not the males, who leave the group at maturity. And males will often form coalitions to deal with out-of-group matters. So border patrols, warfare with rival groups, protection from predators, hunting parties, things like that. The community can only get so big before the genetic bonds between the males begin to get watered down. Right? And then cooperation ceases and the group fragments and they form 2 separate groups. This happens with wolves as well. So you have this. Animals living in massive, highly organized and coordinated colonies as big as human ones can become. They place extreme limits on reproduction. There is one queen, one woman having all the babies, right? And nobody else gets a shot. But everybody is the brother or sister of everybody else in that colony. They are all the children of one mother. That is why they can work so well together. And that's also, they can work very well together because they have biological castes. Worker, soldier, drone, queen, right? But according to Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist who studies morality, one of the reasons we have been able to become just as massively cooperative with each other and be able to live in massive groups of completely unrelated individuals and actually get things done is because of this. A sacred object doesn't actually have to be a god or a religion. It can be a principle or an ideal, a cause or a worldview, a mutual challenge. It can be right or wrong-headed, in your opinion or mine. I mean, let's look at some of them. Right? I mean, we may all agree or disagree with the rightness or wrongness of any of these, philosophies or causes. The important thing is that they are held as sacred by people who really, really identify with them, and that helps to generate cooperative energy within, through a sense of in-group belonging, right? Okay. So you essentially use these objects, you surround them, and you create a sense of shared group identity. You can see kinship bonds evoked in a lot of the language around these kinds of objects. For religion, it might be, we are all God's children. We're all brothers and sisters. Feminism has its sisterhood. We have motherland and fatherland to evoke feelings of kinship between people who believe very strongly in patriotism. Organizations such as the military, which depend heavily on group loyalty in very stressful situations, have historically used the rhetoric of brotherhood and the sacralizing sacred codes of honor to augment their strict formal hierarchies. And because these objects create a sense of shared in-group identity and common purpose, they are a source of lots of good feelings for people. It really feels good to belong. And they're necessary for cooperation and coordination on such a massive, massive scale. Now, the sacred objects that facilitate human sociality, it's our unique ability to coordinate our efforts on this scale. It's a necessary component of what brought us here. You do not see early civilizations without temples. You just don't, right? If we want a civilization, this is our double-edged sword. Right. At the same time, these sacred objects and the group identities they evoke in us erect tribalistic boundaries around the group because you want to protect your sacred object, and they cause deep feelings of animosity regarding outsiders who might question the sacred object or reject membership in the group, kind of like this. If you're not a feminist, then you're a bigot. There is no in-between. Gloria Allred. The downside of this sense of group belonging is that it seems to require the existence of an outgroup, or a challenge, or an adversary. 3 of the 4 basic conflicts in literary fiction are man against man against nature, and man against society, and you cannot have fiction that people will read unless there is conflict. It is more important than plot, it is more important than character. So how better to define the us than in opposition to the them? Liberals versus conservatives, Republicans versus Democrats, atheists versus creationists, the religious versus the devil or human evil, or the infidel, or feminists versus the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And that, I think we all know well enough how that works, but these are sort of the tribalistic things that are going on, and when I say the ultra-sociality and the cooperation that it evokes is a double-edged sword. It can be used for really good things, it can be used for really horrible things. But let's move on to sunken costs and belief perseverance. So imagine you have a hypothesis and you turn that hypothesis into an entire career. During the course of that career, you've managed to acquire a huge amount of status. People think you're brilliant. They admire you. They pay you to speak. Not paying me. They see you as someone who should be listened to. It becomes your life's work and something that you're famous for. You invest your whole being into this. Now imagine somebody shows you just one piece of evidence that undermines the foundational premise of your hypothesis. What do? You've invested so much of your life, your time, your energy, your heart, your soul in this one set of ideas, all of them supported by something you always considered a given. And that's now fallen, that one foundational belief is falling under scrutiny and challenge. Excellent. Not always. Winners never quit and quitters never win, not always. There's a reason this phrase appeals to people, but it is a lie. It is the sunken cost fallacy in meme form. It's about our reluctance to cut our losses once we've invested heavily in a given cause or action, even when solid evidence is presented that the costs of continuing will be not worth the investment. I already paid so much in. I can't abandon this idea now. In the late 1800s, a revolutionary named Ignaz Semmelweis discovered that implementing a program of doctors washing their hands in chlorinated lime could reduce childbed death rates by 90%. When he had documented proof of this correlation, he went to his superiors with his findings, and what became of him? He was fired. The nervous excitation and for humor's theories of disease were the prevailing wisdom at the time. And germs had yet to be discovered. Ignaz's findings didn't just demand a departure from common practices, it required a complete rethinking of how the medical establishment conceptualized disease. He died friendless and impoverished in a mental institution after he'd made a lifelong nuisance out of himself over this newfangled idea of washing your hands. So, this met with such resistance because it struck at the heart of how the medical establishment thought things worked. It cast into question their most foundational assumptions, and that meant throwing everything out, all of it. The foundational belief of mainstream feminists rests on the historic oppression of women by a system of male dominance that confers unjust and unearned privilege on men. Its entire body of theory rests on this one presupposition, this one single one. And the reality is that in every single metric, which everyone would agree would demonstrate that blacks are disadvantaged compared to whites in the US, men fare more poorly than women. In many of these metrics, the gap between men and women is significantly larger than the gap between blacks and whites, and in many of these metrics, men have always fared more poorly than women. Yet what do we hear from feminists regarding all of these inconvenient truths? They're byproducts of male privilege. That men have all the real power within the system, therefore men could easily fix all of these problems, and if they don't, it's on them. And that the root cause of all of these problems is actually the hatred and devaluing of women. So, you know, it couldn't have anything about negative assumptions about men as potential abusers, as violent, as threatening, as inconsiderate, as emotionless, anything like that, even though feminists push these stereotypes all the time. It's because of patriarchy. Patriarchy. It was patriarchy that done did it. Patriarchies privilege men and oppress women, and even without the psychological phenomenon of belief perseverance, the sunken costs involved in the feminist experiment make it impossible to shift the momentum. There is too much money and too much status to lose, too many careers and reputations at stake, and too much potential for embarrassment for the feminist establishment to ever, even so much as consider, let alone admit, that maybe they got something so fundamental just a little bit wrong. And this brings us to men themselves, and how they are their own worst enemies. And I want you to compare these two next images. This one here, okay, and this one here. Okay, notice any similarities? The smug expression on the male's face. Okay, the adoring women standing all around him. Okay? Now, I'm not suggesting that all of these women are, you know, sexually involved with Obama, or that he signed this bill into law in order to get laid. But our particular brand of egalitarian monogamy, this model that facilitated an unprecedented degree of cooperation and tolerance between males, it's a recent innovation, right? And evolution is not an inventor, it's a tinkerer. It leaves everything that's already there, it leaves it there and it just slaps some bubble gum and duct tape on top of it and, you know, little wires to bypass stuff, right? And all of the stuff that existed, you know, before we became what we are now, that's all still there. And the form of social organization we employed before our paths and chimpanzees diverged looked more like this next slide. There you go. Right? And men still have a biological, a psychological impulse to behave this way, to screw over other men in order to impress women. And so this, more than anything else, I think puts the lie to the feminist theory of patriarchy, which is an assumption that men in positions of power, alpha males, would indeed privilege all men at the cost of women's oppression. It defies everything I have ever read or learned about human history and about the origins of our species. Obama, an alpha male, signed into law the most redundant, almost redundant Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act to resounding public approval, and yet somehow this powerful male, arguably the most powerful patriarch in the world, seems to have permanently tabled the proposal presented to him years ago for the creation of a much-needed White House Council on Men and Boys. And that, my friends, is part of who we are as a species, as much as we might wish it otherwise. That is what puts the lie to the entire feminist model of patriarchy, or the immediate and very difficult environmental challenges that necessitated the voluntary investment and cooperation of all males in the success of everyone are less visible now. They're less pressing now. The flow of resources is still one way from men to women and their children, but it is no longer voluntary because it doesn't need to be, and therefore it requires no reward. Government can take resources from men by force in the form of taxes, child support, and alimony, and it will hand those resources to women. There's no pressing need for a woman to negotiate an equitable deal with any individual man for her survival and the survival of her young. And while I might understand how what I've said here, if it all turns out to actually be the case, because, you know, I could be wrong. I understand, I can really get how daunting this tangle of challenges is and how it might bum everyone out. But right now, our approach to gender equality or even basic fairness is the equivalent of the bloodletting of Ignaz Semmelweis's era. And how can we begin to solve the problems that we're facing here without actually being able to understand or acknowledge where they come from, what is causing them? Feminism's patriarchy theory is the four humors understanding of society. And they've systematically bled society in the name of this unproven, unfalsifiable hypothesis that feels very, very comfortable to a lot of people. And while I'm sure you would all be much happier if I could give you easy solutions to simple problems, I'm just out of time. And I can't. I'm hoping that some of the speakers later in the day will have some suggestions on how we can get around this. The problems aren't simple, the solutions won't be easy. They're as complicated and difficult as ogres, and the most difficult challenge of all is that the ogre is us. Thank you.
So give it up for Karen Straughan, everybody. Awesome. No, so we do have time, 15 minutes actually, for a Q&A. So I would ask people who have a question or a comment to limit it to 30 seconds. We have a mic right over there, and it would be great if you could use that so we can record your wonderful question for future viewers, because we're recording this today. So I'll give people a chance to start lining up there. How was your flight, Karen?
It was horrible. It was 8 hours without a cigarette.
All right.
Yes.
Hi. Am I on? Yeah. So I've been watching your videos for a while, so I've got a good idea of just how much academic research you do, or reading some academic papers. but I was wondering, how do you work this into your schedule? How do you do a regular research sessions on what I'm assuming is a regular basis? Because this isn't just articles on a news page that might just come up.
Okay, well, here's one way. My upstairs bathtub still doesn't have a faucet. My baseboards still don't have quarter round molding. There's tumbleweeds of dog hair all through my house. The dishes are rarely ever caught up. My kitchen is a staging ground for dirty dishes. And I don't work an outside job anymore. So YouTube has been good enough to me financially. And with my fiance having gotten a very nice job a year and a half ago, we're pulling in enough money that I don't actually have to go outside the house to work. So that's how I fit it in. And part of how I fit it in is I am kind of monomaniacal about it. You know, it's one of these things that I find absolutely fascinating, and it's not just in terms of being able to do good, you know, for people who are in need. It's not just in terms of, you know, all of those emails that I get that thank me for what I do and tell me that, you know, I changed how they see things, and now they're not angry anymore, or they're not, you know, they're not miserable anymore. Even though a lot of what I say might not give them any hope of things changing, at least they understand what's going on, and that helps them. It's really, I'm fascinated by all of it. I want to understand it. I want to get into every single aspect of it and pick it all apart, and that, I think, is a personality trait that just, I don't know if it's something that anyone could cultivate if it wasn't there. You know, I've known research oncologists who were monomaniacal in that way, and every other aspect of their lives suffered. So, because of their hyper-focus. So I don't know if I can give you any advice on how to fit something like that in. So, but that's how I fit it into my life.
Can we go again?
Sure.
How about a research source? Because a lot of academic papers require academic access. So do you just head to the local? Is this stuff that you can access via a regular website, or do you go to your local college?
A lot of it is not accessible to me. A lot of it's behind paywalls. I don't have any kind of university account that I can access any of this stuff on. But I do rely on other people who do, sending me information. And there are some papers that exist behind paywalls in the first several Google hits or pages, and also exist somewhere else for free online. There's also, you know, lecture series and things like that. Talking with, I've had the honor of talking with a lot of professors and researchers and academics, GADSAD, Dr. Jordan Peterson, people like that who, you know, who are willing to actually have an in-depth conversation with me about these things and kind of confirm some of my conjectures through their own experience in their research. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Cara.
Are you going to ask me why I don't live in Calgary? It's because the people there are awful. See, I've defined the us, it's Edmonton, and the them is Calgary. So.
Well, I'm not going to ask you that.
Okay.
The feminist story is at odds with reality.
Yes.
And so there is a tension there. And as it becomes more extreme and they take things like rape culture and that have a more and more bizarre, then the tension grows. Do you think that there could come a point when the tension between the story and the reality would be such that there would be a tipping point and people would say, wait a minute?
Oh, I think people are already saying it, right? And this is one of the things, like, I don't think that you can live under a collective delusion forever. And the more people who are out there essentially putting the lie to the things that they say, it's... My friend Nick Redding described it as the feminist non-feminist, or feminist anti-feminist cooperation spiral, right? Where essentially you have anti-feminists come in and they put pressure on feminists by exposing their falsehoods and stuff, and then the feminists flip out and tend to get even more extreme in reaction, right? And that results in a couple of things. You have some feminists going, I don't even know if I want to be around these people anymore, and maybe they leave. The ones who were had less investment, emotional investment in it, they leave, so the group gets smaller and more extreme. And then they misbehave all over the place, so all of these more non-feminists become actively anti-feminist, and so you have this cascade effect of essentially there's a cooperation going on between anti-feminists and feminists in terms of we're driving them crazy, they have a tantrum, more people join us. So, you know, that's sort of, I think, what's going to happen. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where things like and none of these challenges that I talked about are going to apply. I think we can definitely make improvements, and I think we can probably winnow down feminism into like a tiny little pocket of insanity that is existing kind of off in its own little corner and maybe doesn't have the influence that it currently has. So yeah, hope so.
Hope so.
Okay, thank you, Karen, for coming, and I'd like to thank all the volunteers in Ottawa who got this thing put together for us. As well as the translators here. There's 3 women here that are translating for the deaf, so thank you guys very much as well. Yeah, I was talking with a woman on the weekend, and she got herself kind of upset reading some of the Facebook pages of our adversaries, I guess it would be called. And I just wanted to know, how do you mentally manage or emotionally manage the idea that you're a supporter of a misogynistic bunch of rape apologists? Yeah.
Oh no, you just have to own it. Like, you know, I probably should have put, you know, Karen Straughan, head rape apologist, at the bottom of the title page of this talk. No, it's because maybe it's just me, maybe not everybody can do this, but it just all bounces off. Like, I know it's bullshit what they're saying, right? And so it kind of boils down to the equivalent of, I mean, it's an ableist analogy, but a mentally retarded kid pointing at you and calling you an idiot.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? That's really how I view that, is that, you know, they don't, like, okay, it's hostility and nobody likes people being hostile toward them, but it just doesn't bother me. They can say what they want, so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because that's it. I sort of look at it as like working with children. I've worked with children a lot, and it's just like they're not giving any sense back. But
Yeah.
you had mentioned that, like, it's just, you feel that it's becoming a smaller corner. I'm actually seeing it, or it's getting pushed away. Do you see it growing on campuses?
Oh,
Like,
of course,
yeah,
of course,
okay.
but that's one of its strongholds. That's like that's the indoctrination center, right?
Yeah.
And they've managed to get their hooks, and this is one of the big parts of how it was like too late when we realized it was an ogre. Is, you know, they're entrenched in academia. I mean, can you imagine dismantling the entirety of women's and gender studies and getting rid of it? Can you imagine that even happening? It's now in elementary schools because feminism is entrenched in most social sciences and most humanities programs, right? It's right in there, in everything. It's threaded through all of the lessons, right? So you have teachers being trained for elementary school with feminist programming, right? So and then it's in the media, and they're the gatekeepers of what the public gets to see, and then if there's any kind of end to net neutrality, we're all toast, right? So essentially, they are the entire establishment at this point, right? Because they have influence on the entire establishment. And so I'm seeing them getting crazier and crazier, and I am seeing normal people on the ground getting more and more fed up, right? They're still being pandered to by politicians, they're still being pandered to in academia, they're still being pandered to in all kinds of policy decisions and stuff like that. But real people, just regular ordinary people on the ground, are starting to say this is a load of bullshit. Yeah. So I think it's actually the beginning of the end is it's starting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just wonder, possible explanation for the incredible hostility and anger towards, from feminists towards certain targets, like the way they just rip them apart. I just wonder if they see it kind of as like a war. Like, because my parents grew up during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, and let me tell you, nobody is sorry when a German soldier stumbled or hurt himself.
Yeah, or got,
Killed. Like,
brained himself on the sidewalk, yeah. No, it's absolutely, they see it as a war, right? And they may say it's a war against patriarchy, but it's a war against essentially, it's a war against what they assume. They assume that any society in which men occupy more than half of the positions of formal power is necessarily unjust, right? That's what they assume. And let me tell you, a matriarchy would not look very nice, because they're making that assumption about men based on their own, a projection of their own psychology and the way they think. And it's the most politically active women in terms of believing this hooey about patriarchy and stuff. They would not be just rulers. It would not be, patriarchy, women and children first in the lifeboats. It would be matriarchy, women, children, and women's luggage first in the lifeboats, right? So that's what it would be like.
and just a question about male consent, since that doesn't seem to come up very much. I just wonder, do they assume that consent is just assumed for men? Or that since they're so powerful, if they really don't want to, they'll have no issue preventing something from happening, or is it just totally off their radar?
I think that they can't, because they do actually believe that men have the right to consent or not to sex, that men's consent matters. They actually, I think, up here, in the front of their brains, right, this nice new part, which is the last stop on the cognition train, they believe, honestly, that consent applies to men too. But I don't think they can wrap the older parts of their brain around or untangle it from the idea that sex is something that men do to women rather than something that men and women do together. They may say that, but I don't think that they really believe it on that deeper level. And so, yeah, no, the issue of, because always it's the man doing and the woman being done unto, as the doer, you don't need to give your consent. The action of doing implies consent. And it is the done unto person who must give their consent to be done, if that makes sense. So.
Thank you.
Oh, you had to show up, Daddy boy.
Well, it's Dan Dynasty, not Duck Dynasty.
There you go. There you go.
I'm here to make Canada great again.
Oh, I thought you wear your smoking jacket, dress up a little, but.
Well, I'd change it up a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna say we've got a mental health issue problem with men. I don't really need to go through the numbers, do I?
No.
About 77% of all suicides in Canada are men.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere around 8 men a day are killing themselves. What part do you think the current narrative plays in adding to those numbers by telling young boys they are everything that's evil in the world today?
I think there are some things that we are doing to men and boys that are, and I'm not even sure that, I'm sure that telling young men that they're all that is evil in the world is not a good thing, but there is one thing that is more common since male suicide started to increase, and the last 2 generations or so of young men, is that these are the young men who have been most likely to have grown up with a relaxation of sort of the toughening up process, right? So you have, you're allowed to cry, and your feelings matter, and your needs matter, and quality time with the kids, and helicopter parenting, and protecting them from all kinds of difficulties, and anti-bullying programs, and all of these things, right? So you have these boys who are led to believe, growing up, that their feelings matter, that people care about them. And then the moment their voice cracks and they sprout a little peach fuzz, the male tears coffee mugs come out. And they're coming out in the hands of the exact same people who've been telling them all their lives that their feelings matter, and they have not, it's a bait and switch, they have not been prepared for this. I mean, we may have to actually, Dr. Brown said at one of his talks in the Q&A section, you know, yeah, okay, there's a difference between a tomboy, you know, in acceptance and a girly boy. And yes, I would love it if in a perfect world, you know, my grandson could be just as effeminate or just as whatever as he, but I don't want him to be the test case for that, right? Because, you know, this is like, I don't want him to suffer in a different way because we, you know, told him that, you know, he should rub a little dirt in it, you know, more often than feminists think that we should have, or whatever, right? And so I think that we're doing that wrong, and I think also, at least, we have to pick one or the other. Either the feelings of males matter, or they don't, right? Because if they don't, once they're grown up, then we have to actually prepare them for that reality as children. And another thing, too, is I don't know that everything is necessarily, every suicide is necessarily an issue of mental health. I think that a lot of it is just the enormity of your life being destroyed. I mean, like, that's not a mental health issue. Anybody would get suicidal if they, you know, in one day in court, they lose their children, they lose their house, their home, they lose half their assets, they lose, you know, half their income.
Their credibility.
All their, yeah, and their credibility and all of this, and they lose all of that, right? All in one go. Now, any suicide hotline would tell you that if somebody called and said, I've just lost my house, it was repossessed, right? They're at risk. If somebody called and said, I just lost my wife, or I just lost my kid, right? They would take that one single thing and they would say, you know, this person is at risk for suicide. And not because of a mental health issue, but because of just a world being shitty to an issue.
Oh, I don't
Right.
know, I might call it a mental health issue, intentionally inflicting that much damage upon a soul, a human soul.
Oh, well, that's mental health by the, you know, the psychopathy of the people who are doing it. But, you know, somehow we expect men to endure all of this loss in one day in a courtroom. And they're not gonna, you know, off themselves at higher rates after that happens? No, it's like the fact that we can't even see it, or the society can't even see that, right, is just absolutely stunning to me.
In 1995, Statistics Canada did a paper on deaths between the sexes. At the end of it, they said, our biggest payout would be if we started paying attention to our young men. Why do you think we are not paying attention? We are still not paying attention to our
Because of everything I talked about. There's no political will because there's no human will to do it. And there won't be maybe for a while. It'll grow. It'll grow as more people notice, but you know, that's just the reality of it. So.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for everybody who put this together. Thanks for doing it right.
And thank you, Karen, not just for this presentation and for coming to be our keynote speaker, but for all the work that you do.
Bumming you out?
That you do on behalf of men and equality.
Yeah.